But here in London, if you were looking at, say, flipping a property and its after repair value was going to be 300,000, well, I would say the average investor I know would probably want minimum $30,000 profit on that flip. So let's put in 35,000 just because maybe you want a little bit more profit. Maybe that's your business model. You know, again, at the end of the day, it's really up to you, but you need to figure out what you're trying to profit in order to determine what your max allowable offer is. What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and I'm really excited for today's video where we're going to be going over max allowable offer. So before I get into actually how to calculate max allowable offer, let's first touch upon what max allowable offer really means to a real estate investor. So if you've never heard of the term max allowable offer, what that really is all about, or what it implies, is what the most amount of money you should be willing to pay for any given property is. And a lot of investors get lost in analysis paralysis, never knowing exactly how to calculate max allowable offer, or they don't even realize that they're allowed to kind of cap themselves when it comes to how much they're going to pay for a property. Now, this is a really simple concept, but I still find a lot of real estate investors struggle with it. So I've taught this in the past on my YouTube channel, but everyone's constantly asking me, can I see the spreadsheet? Can I have your spreadsheet? I want a spreadsheet, da da da. Okay, cool. So I've literally created a brand new free calculator you can access online anytime you want that's going to allow you to calculate your max allowable offer. But before we get into that, I want to talk to you guys about how less than 50% of you that watch my YouTube channel are subscribed to my YouTube channel. So if you guys didn't know, YouTube actually shares analytics with me, and I can see that literally more than 50% of you aren't subscribed. All it takes is a click of a button. It costs you nothing, but one, it really helps my YouTube channel. If you guys didn't know, I desperately want to get to 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. It's just a vanity metric, but they send you a little plaque, a silver plaque with a YouTube play button. And for whatever reason, I built this up into some giant thing that I desperately want. And it would be really cool if you guys kind of helped me out by smashing that subscribe button. And while you're doing it, you know, the like button's right beside it, so you could also smash the like button. All right, now let's jump into CashFlowTribe.com's new calculator where you guys can analyze a lot more than max allowable offers, but today we're just gonna focus on this one niche so you guys know exactly how much money you should be willing to spend on that next property. So you guys should see my screen now. I've got it up here just at the CashFlowTribe.com website. First thing we're gonna do is hit calculators and jump over to check out all the different calculators available to us. All right, so you guys can see I've already got one project on the go, but I'm going to start a brand new project. And when you're at CashFlowTribe.com's calculator, you're presented with two options. One is the Cashflow Tribe Ultimate Calculator, which we'll shoot a whole other series of videos on because there's a lot to digest there. But you can see it calculates things like your purchase and closing costs, CMHC calculator, land transfer tax calculator, a mortgage calculator, a wholesale max allowable offer calculator, a wholesale profit calculator, flipping max allowable offer calculator, flipping profit calculator, a BRRRR profit calculator, a BRRRR perfect max allowable offer calculator, a rental calculator, as well as a simple renovation calculator or a full renovation calculator. So it's pretty robust, but today we're just going to keep it simple and hit that quick analysis calculator button. And for today's video, we're not even going to look at the profit analyzer. We're just going to dive deep into this concept of a max allowable offer. So first thing you're going to have here is your project setup. You guys can take your time and do that, but we're going to jump right into our quick analysis calculator and go over this simple concept that I still find a lot of newer investors struggle with. So this calculator is really focused on what would I be willing to pay for a property, and it's all going to start with my after repair value or fair market value of the property once it's fixed up. So what price would someone pay for the property once the relevant renovations are done for that strategy? So if you guys are unfamiliar with what a wholesale is, a wholesale investment strategy is simply you buy a property, you close on it, and then essentially you relist it and sell it on the open market. Oftentimes you may do some very basic cosmetic work, things like clearing out the junk, maybe doing the basic landscaping of cutting the overgrown grass, or at most maybe you're going to slap a coat of paint or new flooring in, but that's the maximum when it comes to a wholesale. So usually the wholesale renovation fair market value or after repair value is going to be a lot lower than the other strategies available for us. Then when we're looking at the flip strategy, obviously this is if I do my renovations, put the property back up on the market and sell it, at what price would I be able to sell it for once I fully fixed up that property? When we're looking at the rental calculator or the rental stream here on screen, what this is really focused on is just what would a buy and hold turnkey investor pay for your property once you've got it fixed up and it's ready for sale. And then finally, what would a BRRRR investor be willing to pay for that property? And we'll dive through each one of these streams in depth. But first, just want to make sure you guys understand ballpark concepts around these different strategies. So if I'm looking at a wholesale, for this example, I'm just going to make up an example for you guys. So let's assume that the property that we're looking at buying is maybe listed for around $200,000. Now, this doesn't mean that's what we're willing to pay for it, but that's what the seller is asking for. So what we need to figure out is, if I was to buy this property and then immediately relist it on Realtor.ca or the MLS, what would someone maybe pay for it? So let's say right now the grass is overgrown, it's a hoarder living there just filled with junk, they maybe got some pets, so there's some terrible smells in the unit. So literally just by getting that property empty and maybe just sending in cleaners to clean it up, we can immediately make it a lot more desirable to the average buyer. As well, if we send a basic landscaper there and just cut all that crazy long grass, get rid of all the overgrown weeds and the sapling trees that are growing up, it'll make it appear a lot more desirable for any potential buyer. Whether our future buyer is going to be an investor or whether it's just a retail buyer that's looking to buy their family home. So in that case, maybe we're looking at $225,000 is the fair market or after repair value for our wholesale strategy. Now, for those of you that aren't sure how to figure that out, watch some of my previous videos on finding a comp realtor, as well as how to pull comparables and do apple-to-apple comparisons when it comes to analyzing the fair market value or after repair value of a property. Next, we're going to have to focus on closing costs. So what are the closing costs I'm going to incur when I close on this wholesale property? Well, reminder here in my province of Ontario, Canada, the sort of closing costs that we're going to have to take into consideration is your legal costs. And so on that ultimate cash flow tribe calculator I teased at the start, you can actually go through line by line and really dial in to what your exact costs are going to be. But the average lawyer in Ontario probably going to charge you between $1,500 and $2,000 with all their costs and fees and disbursements involved. So let's just assume it's going to be $2,000. Then I'm also going to be paying my land transfer tax. So again, you can use our land transfer tax calculator to get really dialed into what your exact costs are going to be. But let's just assume for the purpose of this exercise, I'm looking at a closing cost of around $5,000. Then, am I paying a bird dog or wholesale fee? So for example, if this property was sent to me by a wholesaler and they're asking, say, a $10,000 wholesale fee on the property, I'm going to want to type that in as well, because that's an additional cost I need to factor into what my max allowable offer is when determining this property. Then holding costs. So when I close on it, between the time that I close on it and I resell the property, when I'm getting my landscaper there, when I'm getting my junk removal people there, when I'm maybe getting my cleaners there, what's my cost? So I'm going to be paying property taxes, I'm going to be paying utilities, and I may have other things. For example, if it's a condo, you might have condo fees. A wholesale strategy, if we're simply doing some basic landscaping, getting junk removal and a cleaner in, there's really no reason why we couldn't get this property back on the market in under a month. And if we assume that our new buyer can close within, say, a 30-day horizon or 45-day horizon, we can probably count on owning this property for maybe 2.5, upwards of 3 months. So then, breaking that down, maybe my expectation is my holding costs are going to be about $3,000 a month. Obviously, it's really going to vary depending upon the property that you're looking at buying. And then renovation costs. With this wholesale strategy, what are my exact expected renovations on this wholesale project? Well, again, we talked about getting a lawn person there. So maybe it's crazy overgrown. Maybe that's $500. We're getting junk removal there. Maybe it's a hoarder filled with tons of stuff. That's going to be a couple grand at least. And then maybe we're getting our cleaners in there, just try and make it smell less terrible. So again, if this property is in really rough shape, that could be another grand. Let's assume that maybe we're looking at $5,000 in total for our renovation costs on the wholesale strategy.
can promise you that. Because it's not just real estate. This is real life shit. We're not here to give you fish. We're here to show you how to fish. You guys have heard of that analogy, right? Because this is a complete disservice if we're just giving you the fish. Be specific, what are you going to do?
I will retire my mom, I will have 12 properties, and I will get my first wholesale deal in the next 2 months.
Hi guys, my name's Marshall. My goal is to really grow my real estate business. CashFlow Tribe seems to be the way to help. CashFlow Tribe!
You probably have your own versions of people trying to pull you into their reality rather than pushing or promoting the reality you're choosing to live in. And to me, if you don't understand your why, it's so difficult on Monday morning when you get back into your normal world to be able to go against that friction. I knew that getting control of my financial life meant that I'd be in control of every aspect of my life.
I lived 43 years of my life as a debt man because I lived in pain and debt until I came to this event. Finally alive. Like I'm rich. I'm richer than everybody around me. Why? I may have less around me from a material standpoint, but I'm rich inside because I found my tribe. CashFlow Tribe!
And I'm learning actually how to build a business for people that have built businesses. Right? I'm not stressed out. I'm happy. My wife's happy. My kids are happy. I'm not broke anymore. Life is good.
This is the room. This is where it ends and begins for me. I'm happy to get to this room. We all have a very similar journey. We've all tried and failed, tried and failed. So when I just come to this room and you guys are here and I get to hear these stories and know that I had a part of it, I'm good.
So again, if this property is in really rough shape, that could be another grand. Let's assume that maybe we're looking at $5,000 in total for our renovation costs on the wholesale strategy. Now, this next part is the part that everyone overlooks when they're trying to calculate their max allowable offer. What's your desired profit margin? So again, this is really a choose your own adventure. You probably want to live within the constraints of basic industry standards. So again, on a property of $225,000 fair market value, we probably can't expect to be able to profit $200,000. Just not practical, right? But for a lot of investors in Ontario, when they're looking at a wholesale project, they might be happy with something like $20,000 to $30,000 for a wholesale. Let's assume that you're in the middle there and you want a $25,000 profit. Well, that's going to work out, as you can see the calculator auto-calculated here, as about an 11% margin that you're seeking on this property. Then we got to factor in the selling costs. So again, when I relist it on realtor.ca, there are costs associated with selling it. Now, in general, I often like to use a 5% because in my market, usually 4 to 4.5% is going to go to the realtor, and then you're going to have a couple $1,000s for your legal fees and maybe some miscellaneous disbursements. So again, that's going to add up to another $11,000 as costs. So if I continue to scroll down here, what I can find is my max allowable offer for this property is $165,750. Now, what does this really mean? Well, this means that, the seller wants $200,000 I mentioned at the start of this exercise. I'm not really going to pay attention to their $200,000 price point because it really means nothing to me because I know my business model and I know what I need to do in order to be successful on this property. I need to buy this for $165,750, excluding a wholesale fee of $10,000, as well as factoring in that I want $25,000 in profit. Now, where a lot of investors lie to themselves on this is they're like, oh, they don't put in anything for their own profit margin, and they scroll down to the bottom and they're like, okay, if I can get for $190,750 or anything below that, I'm gonna make money. So as long as I buy it for $190 or less, I'm good. No, absolutely not. Because again, your time is valuable. You need to focus on actually making money. The reason you got into real estate, the reason you're drawn to real estate is because you want to be a successful investor that makes money on their investment strategies. So absolutely critical that we keep our profit margin within whatever you set out for yourself. And again, as a little side note, if you were looking to maybe make $100,000 a year gross, well, obviously, based upon this model we just laid out, you'd need to do 4 wholesale deals a year in order to be successful in that regards. So that's the wholesale max allowable offer. Now let's look at this as a flip. So obviously, if we're flipping the property, we're going to do more in-depth renovations. And so, we're maybe going to be doing things like replacing the kitchen, fixing up or replacing the bathrooms. Maybe we're doing all new flooring, all new painting. Maybe we've got some structural work. Who knows what's going on, on an individual project basis, but certainly is something we're going to need to take into consideration. So in this case, let's assume that our aftermarket or our after repair value is going to be $300,000 for the flip opportunity. Our closing costs are going to be the same, roughly, about $5,000. Then we've got our bird dog wholesale fee. So again, in theory, this really shouldn't change. If we found this through the same wholesaler, they're likely going to be asking $10,000 on it. Then if we're looking at our holding costs, this is where, again, it's going to change for a flipper because it's going to take you longer to do all those renovations we mentioned. Let's assume in this scenario that we're looking at having to fix up, 2 bathrooms and we got to replace a kitchen. Well, in general, that, I've talked about my $5,000 renovation rule. You guys can jump back and watch some of those previous videos and trainings. But let's assume that we're looking at having to do those 2 bathrooms, do a kitchen, do all new flooring, do new paint. It's probably going to take us over a month in renovations to accomplish all that. And I'd say for the average investor, they're probably looking at 30 to 60 day turnaround time unless they've really got a well-oiled machine when it comes to their operations on their flip projects. So because of that, we're maybe looking at twice the holding period that we would with a wholesale, because also we need to understand that our profile of buyer, when we're flipping a property and bringing it up to its highest, best, most efficient use, well, odds are that buyer, they may have to sell their other house. So again, your closing period might take longer between when you commit to selling the property and when you actually close on it. So I would assume, on a flipping project that my closing period might be anywhere from 30 to 90 days is pretty standard when you're selling a property to a final retail buyer. So in this case, let's assume that our holding costs are actually going to be double and we're looking at $6,000. And now for our renovations, let's say in this case, we're doing our kitchen. Maybe we're dropping $10,000 on the kitchen, $5,000 on the bathroom, $5,000 on the other bathroom, and maybe $10,000 in flooring and miscellaneous paint. Well, in that case, we're 10, 10, 5, and 5. So we're going to be looking at roughly $30,000 in renovations. Now, again, desired profit margin. Well, as a flipper, you're normally going to want a higher profit, a higher net profit at least, from a flip project than a wholesale. And the reason for this is there's going to be a greater perception of risk. You're taking on more complicated renovations. It means better chance something could go wrong or go sideways. As well, you're going to just own the property longer, which means there's a greater chance for black swan events or crazy things to happen. And now sometimes those crazy things can actually help you, and maybe the market gets really hot during your flip and you can sell the property for more. But there's also the risk that your property could decrease in value. And again, this is something you're going to need to factor in as an individual investor based upon your perception of the overall market. But here in London, if you were looking at, say, flipping a property and its after repair value was going to be $300,000, well, I would say the average investor I know would probably want minimum $30,000 profit on that flip. So let's put in $35,000 just because maybe you want a little bit more profit. Maybe that's your business model. Again, at the end of the day, it's really up to you, but you need to figure out what you're trying to profit in order to determine what your max allowable offer is. And then selling costs. We're going to incur the same rough selling costs on a percentage basis of the property. So in this case, 5%, that's going to work out to $15,000, right? Because our after repair value, the fair market value once we fix up the property, is going to be $300,000. So scrolling to the bottom now, we can see that my max allowable offer under this scenario is actually $199,000 for the flip opportunity, whereas when we're looking at the wholesale, it was $165,000. And this is where it's really important you as an investor understand this concept of max allowable offer, as well as understanding that not every property is created equal for every strategy. There's going to be properties where it's going to make a lot more sense to do a little bit more in renovations, but you're going to be able to sell it for a lot more money. And there's going to be other times that the wholesale strategy might actually be the more favorable or profitable. So right now, just based upon these two streams that we've already calculated, I could quickly tell you that, I'm going to want to buy that property somewhere in the range of $199 or less. And ideally, I'm going to maybe start at that $165 price point and push to see what I can get away with. But I know that I'm going to have to stop. My line in the sand is at $199,000, and that I'll have to flip that property. So again, each individual investor, based upon the project they're looking at, your input costs are going to vary. Now, if you guys would like me to do a whole separate video on how to calculate some of these input costs, if you'd like to see me do an in-depth analysis on anything we discussed here, or maybe use a real-life example and walk you guys through that real-life example, comment in the comment section down below, because I'd love to make more videos showing you guys how to make the most of this absolutely free, I did mention free, right, calculator that you can get on the cashflowtribe.com website. And we'll throw a link in the video description down below so that you guys can grab all that. But I'd love to get your feedback as well. This is obviously just in the initial launch phase. And this video actually took a lot longer than I expected. So we'll make a part 2 video, and I'll walk you guys through exactly what we do when we're looking at the rental and the burst streams on our max allowable offer calculator.